Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar called Connected Retail, Building the Business Case for IoT. I'm Debbie House, Editor-in-Chief of Retail Touchpoints, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. We're honored today to be joined by Nikki Baird from Retail Systems Research and Oliver Guy from Software AG, who will share insights into how retailers can be successful with IoT initiatives. We welcome you to follow this and all other Connected Consumer Series webinars on Twitter using the CC Series hashtag. This webinar event is the second in a series of 10 presented as part of the Retail Touchpoints Connected Consumer Series. During this series, attendees have had the opportunity to hear from leading industry experts who are discussing the most important topics on retailers' minds today. By registering for one session, attendees have access to all complimentary presentations, both live and on demand. So if you're not able to attend one or more of the sessions, they're all available free to all registrants. You can access them on demand at your convenience. For today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. Right now, you should be viewing the On24 dashboard, which shows the live viewing screen. By clicking on the Questions widget on the right-hand side of the screen, you can type in questions during the live presentation and press Submit. You'll also find a widget named Resources under Questions, and here you can download any assets our presenters have provided. For those of you who might be new to Retail Touchpoints, here's a quick overview. We're an all-digital media company publishing a weekly email and online newsletter, daily news, special reports, and multimedia presentations. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter. And we welcome input and feedback through traditional means, both phone and email, and also through social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Our website is www.retailtouchpoints.com. So before I introduce today's speakers, I want to remind the audience that the presentation is slated for approximately 30 minutes with time for live questions at the end. Once again, we invite you to submit questions in the questions area as they come to mind. Our presenters will be able to stay online following the presentation to respond to your questions or reach out to you after the presentation to answer your questions. Also, the webinar is being recorded, as I said earlier, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with colleagues. So our first presenter today is Nikki Baird, who's a managing partner with Retail Systems Research. She's one of the most recognized analysts covering the retail industry today. Nikki focuses on trends impacting the consumer-retailer relationship along with their supply chain and marketing implications. She's written research and articles on topics ranging from in-store marketing and technology, store performance management, supply chain and multi-channel fulfillment, retailer-manufacturer collaboration, merchandising and loyalty, and promotions management. Prior to becoming an analyst, Nikki was a retail executive, a software provider, and a consultant. And then later in the presentation, we'll be joined by Oliver Guy, Global Retail Industry Director at Software AG. Oliver works with Software AG's customer-facing teams across the world in order to help their retail clients understand how Software AG's solutions can manage risk, grow sales, and drive efficiency as the industry transforms. With more than 12 years focused on retail, Oliver has worked with major global retailers such as Edcon, John Lewis, Ahold, Dixon's Carphone, Metro, Best Buy, Morrison's, ICA, Panda, Vodafone, O2, and Boots to help improve their businesses through the use of innovative technology solutions. Prior to joining Software AG, Oliver was part of the European management team at Oracle Retail. His team was responsible for retail-focused solution consulting across Europe. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Nikki. Welcome, Nikki.
Thanks, Debbie. So let me get started by setting some context. With Internet of Things in retail, there's definitely been a lot of activity recently, and we'll explore some of the drivers behind the interest and activity. So what I'm going to cover, I'm going to start with one big difference between what we've seen around activity around IoT in the past versus what we're seeing today, and that's a focus on customer experience and not operations. And I'll explain a little bit about what I mean about that. And that retailers expect IoT to actually have a very large impact on their businesses very quickly. So we'll share some data from some research that we've done that demonstrates that. We'll ask the question, are retailers realistic about ROI? And talk a lot about that in setting the context for the rest of this presentation. And then there are some maturity challenges, and those actually play into some of the issues around ROI to begin with. So there's really two types of use cases out there for ROI these days, especially when you're looking at it in the context of retail. And in the old days, when everybody first started talking about the Internet of Things, the first kind of use case that really was kind of laid out for the industry was the one on the right, which is really that, like the classic use case example is that a sensor in a refrigerator detects that the temperature is slowly creeping upwards and would signal that preventive maintenance is needed before there was an actual failure in the refrigerator, and therefore alerting an individual to come and service the refrigerator. So that's what I mean when I say something that's really sort of more operational. That side of the equation is really about saving money. Where retailers are really excited about IoT is much more on the left side, which is the customer-facing side. And actually, this was really a kind of a shock for me when we did the research that I'll share with you, because I really expected retailers to think that you know, this is about saving money, but it's not. It's about making money, and it's about making money through creating compelling customer experiences. So what do I mean by compelling customer experiences? So we asked retailers to rate their top 3 opportunities for IoT to have an impact on their business. And you'll look at that first one, maintaining inventory accuracy in stores, and the first thing that you might think out of that is oh, she said not operational, and that's very operational. But actually, when you dig into the drivers behind their interest in maintaining inventory accuracy in stores, it's not about operations. It's not about supply chain and stockouts. Their interest is really in being able to promise online buyers access to in-store inventory. And they can't make those promises if they don't know if the inventory is there. And that's really driving their interest in that particular one. The next one on the list, closer engagement with consumers through their internet-connected devices, whether that's watches or phones or appliances. That one is very much about the customer experience and the role that retail can play in that experience. The next one, maintaining system-wide inventory, is very much related to the first one, around just being able to promise every scrap of inventory that a retailer has in their system to somebody who wants to buy it. And then this next one on the list is really interesting to me. New services offered to consumers through monitoring their internet-connected devices. So this is taking that predictive maintenance example but applying it to a consumer's own connected dishwasher, for example, or you know, the smart refrigerator example all the time of ordering more milk for you, or detecting that your milk is going bad and letting you know that you need new milk. What's not on this list, and the list was actually much more exhaustive, that we asked retailers to rate these opportunities, but I only showed you the top 5, and there were actually like 8 or 10 on the list. The bottom 3 were all those classic operational things, like predictive maintenance of your HVAC systems, you know, very much more operational focused and about saving costs. And those were the things that retailers pretty overwhelmingly said, we're not interested. We're much more focused on the customer experience. So the other thing to know about retail in general, especially when it comes to implementing technology, is that retailers tend to be very conservative. And actually, in the preparation for this webinar, I was trying to see if I could find who could actually be credited with saying this quote, that the only thing a first mover ever gets is arrows in the back. And I couldn't find it, so if somebody knows, definitely tweet me and let me know who it was. But I've heard this more often in regards to technology investments that retailers make. They are very conservative about technology. It's part of why we do the research we do to help share perspective on where retailers really are investing and the business drivers behind those. And when we did this IoT survey, which last year was our inaugural year, I really expected retailers to be very conservative about just how they were viewing this opportunity and how long they thought it would take before that opportunity would impact their business. and boy, was I wrong. So when we asked retailers what they expected to see out of IoT and the impact it would have on their business, they definitely proved me wrong. They said that they really anticipate that the Internet of Things will drastically change the way companies do business in the next 3 years. They think that it will have a big impact on consumer products, on the things that retailers sell to consumers in the next 3 years, which sort of explains why they were so on top of wanting to be able to connect with consumers through their own Internet-connected devices. They anticipate that the technology that consumers will be carrying around with them will also be much greater. And then on the flip side, their confidence in the speed with which this will impact the industry in general extends to a lesser extent, but it still does extend to their own business. This one is sort of a question in the negative, but we asked them to assess whether their company has no idea of how IoT will impact their own operations, and they basically said, no, we kind of have some ideas. How that translates into their spending, though, is something I'll share on the next slide. So we asked retailers what they felt was the bar that needed to be set in order for them to actually make investments in IoT projects. And this was another area where I was just very startled. My expectation was that it would be sort of the general set of ROI expectations that most retailers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But instead, we had this plurality. The highest bar on this chart is retailers saying it's not about ROI, it's about doing the things that keep us competitive. And when we looked into who actually was saying that they didn't need an ROI, that the urgency for them is so great that ROI is not necessarily a part of their consideration, it wasn't the smallest companies like you would expect. It was actually the majority of that response set was $5 billion or greater in revenue. I can appreciate the sentiment. And I think that's ultimately what they're expressing is this sentiment that this is really important and it's something that they need to do. It's not necessarily about the ROI in terms of how they're prioritizing these projects. However, I've never met a retailer ultimately who didn't have to deliver an ROI and have to stand in front of a board and explain the money that they've spent and how that actually has delivered value to the business. And in fact, it's such a common thing in the end that it's great to say that you need to be able to do this because it's ultimately important to the business. But you still have to express this value. And I think one of the challenges around IoT, one of the risks, is that if retailers go into this perspective, with this perspective that IoT is something that just needs to be done, they're going to find out in the end that they may have spent money without a clear direction or clear orientation towards actually delivering value to the company. Because in the end, throwing a bunch of sensors out into the environment isn't what's going to make you competitive. It's how you use those things all together to deliver that customer experience that retailers say that they're trying to deliver. And when you look at it in terms of their overall maturity around IoT and how well they're delivering on projects internally that leverage IoT, this is sort of another red flag. The majority of respondents here say that they're competent or below, and competent really only means that they have some projects that are in place, but they're being run by individual departments. And that's another big risk for IoT investments, is that this is, I hate to use the P word, but the reality is this is a platform. This is a technology platform that ultimately individual use cases and solutions are built on top of that platform. And right now, the maturity level in retail in general is such that you've got 10 different departments that are running off and doing 10 different things with IoT without a lot of consideration for that platform itself, which also makes the case, the ROI business case, much more difficult to build, because there's no leverage across any of these organizations. And that's a point that I just really want to drive home because, you know, at RSR we've seen other technologies founder in the past, not because they can't deliver on the value that they promised, but because companies did not implement them in a way to make sure that they could capture that value. So, you know, everybody has some kind of analogy. I'm going to use a bridge one here. You know, I talked about a platform, and IoT is definitely falls into that platform category. You know, that's the bridge. The real value in IoT isn't in the platform itself. Just like with this bridge, the value isn't in the bridge. The value is in the service that the bridge provides. And the problem for most lines of business is that all they ever want to pay for is for their piece of how they use that bridge, and they never actually ultimately want to pay for the foundation. The real challenge with IoT, though, is for the first few projects that are out of the gate, if you burden those projects with supporting the entire investment that's needed for that platform infrastructure. So if you try to make this one car pay for the whole bridge, you're never going to get an ROI in the end that really, you know, puts on the table, one, the full value of IoT, and two, that doesn't bury this one project with a whole bunch of infrastructure costs or platform costs that ultimately all the other cars on the bridge are going to benefit from. So oftentimes I see cases where business cases sort of sink a project because one project is being forced to bear all of those infrastructure costs, or there's an ROI that's calculated only on the value of the car, and the expectations aren't ever set about how much money will need to be spent to actually build out the bridge itself. And so when those costs actually sort of come to the table, then the individual project is deemed a failure, even though technically it actually was a success. The expectations just weren't set at the right level as to what kind of value and where the money is going to be spent. So I promised that I would talk about how retailers are focused on customer experience and not operations. That IoT, unlike what we've seen in the past with other sort of new areas of technology investment, retailers expect the change coming from IoT to happen to them very fast. They're not exactly realistic about ROI, and certainly we've seen a history of making mistakes in the past around how they calculate the investment or how they assign investment to expected returns. And IoT is definitely a place where those kinds of mistakes could happen again, especially when you match up the infrastructure and platform nature of IoT with these really high expectations for how much it's going to impact their business quickly. And retailers are not at a maturity level where they are considering IoT from the perspective of a platform as opposed to individual, you know, point solutions that are being implemented or tested out by a whole bunch of different departments without that big picture view for how the whole business will support that. So with that, I will turn it over to Oliver.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for that, Nikki. Really, really useful insights, and great to see the output from the survey last summer. So the Internet of Things, there's an awful lot of hype about this, and you know, so what I wanted to do was just kind of start off with kind of our perspective on this. We've done a lot of work around the Internet of Things at Software AG, but you know, I say there's a lot of hype about it. But you know, the first question's got to be, well, how big is it? And what does it mean for retail? So McKinsey have done an awful lot of work on this, and they've estimated, and it's a very, very broad range, but by the year 2025, they believe it will have an impact of somewhere between 400 and 1,200 billion US dollars every year. Now, as I say, that is a wide range, but even if you take the lowball number, that is a very significant effect it's going to have on the retail industry. So, that shows it really is, that bears out some of the evidence from the RSR research in terms of it having a dramatic impact in the years to come. So when I talk to retailers and I have a lot of conversation with retailers, and I ask them, what are you doing around IoT, and what are the sort of projects you're looking at? And if you do, if you look at, keep an eye on the news, the retail news, the retail technology news, you see examples of experiments that retailers are undertaking. So these are some of the experiments with smart mirrors, electronic shelf edge labels, beacons, smart badges, all these kinds of things. But the reality is these don't get very far. Very, very few get really beyond either an experimental store or 2 or 3 trial stores. They're not things that we're used to seeing on our everyday shopping trips actually in stores. And when you have asked the question, why is that the case? The reality is you talk to people and they say, well, actually it's because the business case doesn't stack up. That's certainly the conversation I've experienced. And alongside that, I've also heard the comment, well, the problem, Oliver, is that in retail, the multipliers in terms of the number of items and the number of stores are so big, it just makes these things really, really expensive. So well, anecdotally, that is the case. It's also borne out in the research that RSR did. So if we look at the organizational inhibitors, the second and third one, which are highlighted on the graph, these both focus around business case and our return on investment, being the overall capital requirements, being the second one down on the list, so that you can think of that as the bridge, using Nikki's analogy, and the other one being around actually the business case not being specific, not being great enough to support a given use case. So what I wanted to do was think about something in a slightly different way. So let's pick one of these examples. So electronic shelf edge labels. Now these have been around for quite a while, if we're completely honest. I would say that I've seen them kind of experimented within stores over 10 years ago, but they're not mainstream yet. And I was sat in a customer's innovation lab a couple of months ago, and they had 4 or 5 different types that they were playing with. But if you think about the electronic shelf edge labels, and one of the big things here, of course, again, is the whole multiplier element. There's a lot of shelves in a store. There's a lot of stores in a grocery environment, for example. The multipliers become very, very large. So the cost has to be outweighed by the benefits. So if we think about what are the benefits of electronic shelf edge labels, well, the staff efficiency gain, so you get an element of productivity improvement. You also potentially get some error reduction in terms of avoiding the risk of a different price between the point of sale and the shelf edge. And then also you get a saving in terms of paper and print costs. But the reality is, are those 3 things, are they quantifiable enough? Are they large enough to actually justify the investment? So what I wanted to do was talk about connected retail and what we mean by connected retail, and just talk about use the electronic shelf edge labels as an example. So before I do that, so connected retail for us is, and as I said to you earlier, we've done an awful lot of work on this at Software AG. The focus here of connected retail is about connecting these IoT initiatives to existing IT infrastructure, but also to other IoT projects or IoT initiatives. So what I wanted to do is work through an example. So we think about electronic shelf edge labels. We talked about the business case. Now, in a typical retail environment, you may already have a certain number of projects, a certain number of assets and initiatives that might exist here. So for example, you might have price and promotion optimization. You might have a view of real-time or near real-time in-store inventory. You might also have a view of real-time point-of-sale streaming, so you can actually view at head office what is actually being sold in real time. Now, for us, connected retail is about connecting these together. So in this example here, what we're saying is by connecting the three existing investments to the electronic shelf edge labels, we have potentially the ability to create a use case that you might want to call real-time offer alignment, whereby you can start looking at what you're selling in real time, what your inventory is in real time, and then starting using things like predictive analytics to look at near future performance. And if you have a situation, for example, where you're potentially selling too quickly because an offer is too good, there's potentially the opportunity of, potentially the risk, of actually losing margin or actually having a stock out. If you're selling too slowly compared to the plan, there is the risk again of having excess stock. So what this then gives you the ability to do by monitoring these things together is actually do a real-time or near real-time offer adjustment potentially without any human interaction, and actually roll that out to the electronic shelf edge labels, but also to the point of sale during the trading day. So that becomes quite an interesting proposition. So if we think about this from a business case perspective, this starts to get interesting. So if we think about our electronic shelf edge labels, plus existing technologies such as POS streaming, price optimization, and in-store inventory, if we think about, and we call that real-time offer alignment, you think about the business case, we've obviously got the benefits that we talked about earlier on when we think about the electronic shelf edge labels. But by combining these, all of a sudden, the benefits become supplemented by these new things: potentially increased sales, increased promotional uptake, reduced stockouts, increased margin because you're not giving that margin away. So this all of a sudden becomes a new and exciting proposition in terms of actually justifying an IoT investment, and actually potentially drives additional value out of previous investments in terms of technology. So from the work we've done at Software AG and the conversations we've had with our customers, we've come up with a view in terms of IoT maturity. And the key thing to look at this before I do the build on this is on the y-axis on the left-hand side, the increasing value and return on investment, and then the x-axis at the bottom being time. And the reality here is not everybody feels ready to jump to the highest level of maturity immediately. So for us, the first stage of this is what we would refer to as sense. And this, in reality, is where most retailers are today. And even if they rolled out one of these individual assets or one of these individual projects, it typically exists in isolation. It exists as a disparate initiative. And you have the ability to look at one particular asset. So, for example, you're able to look at point of sale data at head office or real-time inventory, or but also send out a signal to electronic shelf edge labels in order to actually update them. So the next level of maturity is where we start looking at these things together. So effectively combining the data feeds together on a single screen. So we refer to this as pan-sensor visibility. This is where you could very easily have a screen showing inventory in a given store or across your store estate, but also sales across your store estate in real time. So we refer to this as pan-sensor visibility. The third stage is where we start to get a little bit cleverer, a little bit more clever, whereby we start looking at these individual streams of data and correlating between them and actually creating an alert to suggest to a planner or somebody within the merchandising operations team that they might want to do something. So, for example, again, I was talking about predictive analytics, whereby you're looking at your sales, your predicted sales into the future based on what you've sold so far in your inventory, sending an alert to say, this product here you might be about to run out of stock in the next few days. You might want to do something about it. And that could be adjust the offer, or it could be create an additional supply request onto your suppliers, or expedite a shipment, or redeploy from another store. But the key thing is here, you're alerting the planner to actually do something about this. And again, this is more active and less passive than the pan-sensitive visibility approach, which requires somebody to go and look at a screen. Then the fourth element here is what we refer to as automate. And this is where you actually have the opportunity of helping the planner out by actually taking certain activities away from them, given this example. So if, for example, a particular promotion is not performing correctly or not performing according to plan, you could actually, without the planner actually having to have any direct involvement, you could actually review the price, review the offer, check the consumer response model in the price and promotion optimization, automatically update the price within the store without any interaction by the planner. And that then frees the planner up to do more value-add activities in terms of planning future promotions, for example. Now, these last two, we refer to these as driving the ability to leverage the retail moment. And for us, the retail moment is about a specific opportunity that exists right now that allows you to take that opportunity and actually that opportunity that will never exist again. So, for example, if a particular customer was in a position to buy something right now, you might want to create a specific promotion for them. So this is where we talk about the retail moment and actually taking that opportunity because you have the ability to respond very, very quickly. Okay, so in summary, and I'm going to bring Nikki back into the discussion in a moment. I just wanted to start off kind of with a summary. So the summary points are really on the left-hand side of this slide. So the first thing really is it's pretty clear that the Internet of Things will be significant in retail. It will be huge. But each of these initiatives on their own, they're just not big enough. And what you need to do is you need to combine both IoT investments together, or IoT projects together, but also combine them with existing investments in order to drive out a business case, a really, really solid business case. And so we refer to this as connected retail. So this is a great opportunity for retailers to connect these pieces together and actually create a really, really compelling business case. So Nikki, can I bring you back into the conversation, please? So I want to talk through the advice.
I'll give the advice. So
thank you.
You need to look at how to elevate the IoT conversation beyond individual initiatives, and that means, yes, working at the executive team level. It also means working hard to make sure that you identify where projects are going on, so that there is an enterprise level awareness of experiments, so that you're not stifling innovation, but at the same time making sure that everybody understands both, kind of the full breadth of the activity that the company is taking on and how all those pieces ultimately will fit together. And IoT does not exist in a vacuum. And so that's number 6 on this list, is just, you have to consider how all of the things that retailers are doing, particularly around omnichannel, and particularly because there is such focus on the customer experience, that IoT needs to be considered within the context of those strategies, and not as a separate skunkworks or completely separate project. There's a lot of mutual benefits that exist between the two, and that really is the next point on here as well. Is that there are existing investments that are going on, and IoT often, when you consider it in the context of those investments, it can enhance or accelerate the value that can be achieved by some of those investments. So just as IoT shouldn't be treated in isolation in terms of an investment, it needs to be considered in those strategies. The existing strategies need to be considered in the context of how IoT can help them achieve their benefits. And then when looking at IoT-related infrastructure, make sure it can scale. This one, obviously Software AG has a lot to say about that, but I think it's a good, healthy warning given how exuberant retailers seem about these IoT opportunities and what they perceive they can do for their business. This is a technical solution. This is not like a lot of the digital marketing technologies, for example, that the marketing organization would often do without any, visibility from the IT department. This is a technical solution, and we've been talking about big data, but that is an understatement when it comes to what IoT will do in terms of generating data, in terms of the impact it will have on your network, in terms of how you architect, how these sensors are laid out, and how insight is actually gathered from these sensors. This is definitely a different way of looking at your technology architecture, and IoT will be asking things of that architecture that we really have not asked of it before. So making sure that the ultimate foundation of your technology infrastructure, making sure that it can handle what you're going to be asking of it as you implement IoT projects is crucial. And that's the advice portion.
Thanks, Nikki. Okay, so that sums up the presentation. So I'd just like to a small plug for our microsite. So if you want to know more about our perspective in terms of connected retail, feel free to browse our microsite, which is softwareag.com/connected retail. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Thanks to Nikki and Oliver. Great presentation. So much to think about when it comes to IoT. So I want to remind our audience at this point, you can still type in questions, and if we are not able to get to all of your questions, Nikki and Oliver will certainly be able to follow up with you afterward. So I'll just kick it off and go to you, Oliver, with the first question, and that is, what do you see as the characteristics of an early IoT adopter retailer?
Okay, thanks, Debbie. Okay. So I guess what I would say is, I guess if you wind the clock back a few years, there were a number of retailers who were kind of early doors with things like omnichannel. They were kind of trailblazers, if you like. And when I look back at those particular retailers, what was interesting about them is, the two or three that I can think of, they had true visionaries from a kind of driving this, be it at their helm, or people who were actually prepared to take the ideas to the board. So I guess really that's a key thing is having somebody who's a mover and shaker, if you like, a strong visionary who actually sees that there's significant value to be had by looking at the Internet of Things. Nikki, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, I would say this a very similar perspective. I mean, I think it helps when you've got somebody who is an evangelist internal to the organization. I think what's sort of more of a twist on this one is that this is a case where you definitely need an evangelist from the IT side of the business, as well as whatever kind of line of business is looking at the opportunity, because like we said before, the infrastructure components to this, they're a very different consideration than some of the other things. Even omnichannel, while it has a huge impact on the company's overall technology investments and technology architecture, even that is nothing compared to IoT.
Thanks to both of you. Really good points. And as we see, especially with omnichannel and advancing into projects like these, it's so important for business units to collaborate. So great points. So back to you, Oliver. Would you say that you see any difference in geographic interest and take-up of IoT-type projects?
That's an interesting one. I mean, I hear different views on this, if I'm honest. Generally, North America and Europe are pretty strong. Opinions vary about, the UK being, kind of a real trailblazer in some of these areas and some of these initiatives. However, I mean, we've been doing some interesting work with a couple of retailers actually in South Korea. But it is difficult to say that, this country is a long way ahead of the others. Nikki, would you share that view, or do you have a different perspective?
Yeah, I would say mature markets. I mean, in some ways, I think it follows the health of the communications infrastructure, your ability to put a network out there. But, we also see, this is one of the more fascinating aspects of IoT, that, part of the value that it provides is basically shining a technology light into dark spaces of the enterprise, and some of the darkest spaces tend to be very remote. So, there's, even though like the leadership or the drive is being driven out of more mature markets, I expect that we'll see plenty of use cases that can easily be leveraged in remote places, especially given the desire to put kind of at least one level of analytics on the devices themselves, so that they're just not blindly sending data back over a network, but actually sort of raising an alert when it becomes really important. As I look towards less mature retail environments, and even they're investing in things like lockers for delivery, for remote delivery of things that people can then pick up that they bought online. There's definitely plays for sensors and for IoT and for connected retail in those environments too. And I think that's part of what makes IoT so fascinating.
So would either of you like to speculate on the advancement of IoT within the United States compared to what's going on in the rest of the world?
Nikki, you live in the United States.
Yes, I do.
Better place than I am.
There's definitely lots of experimentation going on, and one of the things about IoT is it's kind of an umbrella term for a lot of things. So if you consider RFID as part of IoT, which it pretty much is, then absolutely there's been a lot of activity around RFID, and beacons as well. Beacons is another area where it is an IoT technology, and absolutely there are retailers who are experimenting with those things, and in some cases starting to roll out. I think the real question is, if you've got a retailer who's got beacons and who has RFID of item level products, can those things talk and interact with each other in any way? I suspect not. I suspect that those are pretty individual initiatives, and I think it goes back to that maturity level of, you've got one group, that marketing that's driving a beacons project, and you've got a store or supply chain team that's driving an RFID project, and are those two projects able to talk to each other? Probably not.
So
yeah, again, highlighting, go ahead.
So they're at the sense level of maturity.
Yeah.
Yeah, good points. Thank you. So Oliver, you talked about scalable IT infrastructure as a requirement. Can you talk a little bit about the key technologies that retailers need to consider to have in place to have the right foundation to support IoT projects?
Yeah, so I mean, as Nikki alluded to, clearly Software AG, we've got quite a lot to say about this. But the key thing when we think about requirements around IoT is the masses of data quantity. So you think about all of these sensors and being able to do something in real time. That drives out a couple of requirements. So the first, really, from our perspective, is high-speed connectivity. It's no longer about a BI report and understanding what happened yesterday. You need to know that something's happened now, and then actually to be able to do that reaction and to be able to bring those. I talked about bringing the data streams together. So combining the different data feeds when I was talking you through the example with the electronic shelf edge labels is real-time analytics, so that you can actually understand what's going on and actually kick a process off. To think about the automate, to actually kick something off, to actually go out and do something in reaction to that. So those really are the two key elements for me. One is the high-speed connectivity, the other is the real-time analytics.
Is there anything, Nikki, that you wanted to add there?
No, I think Oliver covered that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up for today. And again, I want to remind our audience that if your questions were not answered, Nikki and Oliver will be able to follow up with you afterwards. So please feel free to send them in as they come to mind. So the final question I want to ask both of you this afternoon is, are there any specific business drivers that may make retailers look more seriously at IoT initiatives?
Okay, so I mean, there's a couple of things really for me that kind of that I would note. So one is obviously the competitive pressures in terms of efficiency from organisations like the pure play online like Amazon. So there's the efficiency drive and the ability, the requirement to sell more. But I mean, something else we're seeing in various countries around the world is living wage type initiatives that have been driven by central government, which is creating a real need for employee efficiency. So there's we're seeing certainly an interest in IoT type projects because of that. So for me, it is a lot of it is around efficiency. But if you really look at it, it boils down to customer centricity. So can you if you think about efficiency, it's about can you provide the right product at the right price, and the efficiency drives price. So and the right price is it's all about customer centricity. So all of these things are interrelated. Nikki, I mean, I know you and I have spoken before about customer centricity, but what's your view?
Yeah, I would even take it down a level and say that we're seeing a lot of interest in the store. So for IoT, I said it's a technology that gives enterprises the ability to sort of shine some light in some dark spaces, and in retail, the store is a dark space. When it comes to understanding how consumers behave when they're in the store, where products migrate to during a shopping day in the store, all of those things, you can contrast, and it's a tired contrast, but it's still a painful one for a lot of retailers that, they have all of this visibility into shopping behavior and the overall health of their website online. There's all kinds of digital breadcrumbs that they can follow and garner insights from. And in the store, you just can't do that. And IoT, I think, part of the reason why retailers are so enthusiastic about it is because they see that opportunity for IoT to sort of light up the inside of a store and give them the data and the perspective that they need in order to understand how consumers are behaving when they're in their store and how those behaviors translate into the products that they do and do not buy. And hopefully provide some insights into what retailers can do to make those stores a healthy place and a very engaging place for customers. There's just so many retailers that are struggling with how to make their stores perform at the level that they used to perform before online became a thing, and they're still really struggling with that. Even retailers who have been very successful and aggressive with omnichannel have struggled with that. So as far as business drivers go, definitely looking at the store and how to get more intelligence out of the store so that retailers can keep them competitive in the future.
Yeah, I like the way you talk about shining a light in dark places, and it has a lot of meaning on a lot of levels, and I think that will really make it a good point with our retailers who are listening. And it's not just about what's happening online, right? It's also what's happening on mobile phones and through social media. And there's so many channels that store-based retailers have to think about these days. That I think the points that both of you made today really have a strong impact. So I want to thank both of you again. I want to thank Nikki and Oliver for your insights, for all the information that you shared. I think we're going to have a lot of good discussions about IoT moving forward. So I appreciate your time today. I want to thank our attendees as well and let you know we have another session coming up in the Connected Consumer Series. It's called The Internet of Me, Investigating the New Rules and Realities of Retail Personalization. So taking IoT even a step further, I think, talking about the Internet of Me. It's at 12 noon tomorrow, Wednesday, March 16th. So once again, I want to thank both Nikki and Oliver for your insights and your input on this topic, and I want to just let the rest of you know to enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.